So here's the thing. There's an episode of Yu Yu Hakusho, which is easily my favorite series of all time, where the characters get trapped inside of a popular video game. It's a little more complicated than that, of course, but that's the gist of it. Anyhow, there's a clip of someone describing the game they're trapped in.
It's not just any video game, it's the video game.
There's such thing as a game balancing stronger gameplay over story and vice versa. There's such thing as a game having a variety of things to do or grasp fascination with concepts, but it's very rare, especially nowadays, where a game can accomplish all of that, delivering not only a good time, but an experience. Such is the case here with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, encapsulating the entirety of March 2024 with over 130 hours of pure bliss. Where to begin with Final Fantasy VII? I have faint postcard memories of dabbling with the game back when it dropped in 1997 at friends' houses. I was more of a Sega Nintendo guy, and PlayStation and Xbox stuff didn't really click with me until maybe the mid-2000s. Honestly, what kind of sparked the interest in any form of PlayStation interest was Final Fantasy X, or 10, something I saw endlessly promoted on Toonami while watching, go figure, Yu Yu Hakusho. Keep in mind I had minimal exposure to the Final Fantasy series, so I assumed X was just yet another entry in the series. So much so that Titus was actually Cloud, or that Cloud was Titus. I downloaded an emulator for Final Fantasy VII again to actually play through the game. And I got stuck. Yeah, I reached an iron wall in a sense, getting stuck at the Beta Snake, or Zolom, or in Rebirth's case, Midgar Somer? I didn't think to consider to use the Chocobo back then. I didn't care. I was done. That was it for a while. Eventually I did jump back into Final Fantasy X and X-2, and also learned how the Final Fantasy series essentially operates, each numerical entry being its own entity, with some having loose connections. Ironically enough, 10's theorized to be connected to 7 in some ways. I give the background of my experience to illustrate how my mind was when jumping into 2020's Final Fantasy VII Remake. I played the demo back when it dropped in February 2020 out of sheer curiosity, and I found it to be really fun. It felt like a cross between Mass Effect with the ability to slow down time, and Phantasy Star Online with the ability to use button mashing to execute attacks with a variety of movesets to keep the player engaged. Speaking of, Phantasy Star Online 2 had also just released, so with that and Animal Crossing, combined with a few books and series, Remake was something I was considering revisiting later, but never bothered. Then, lockdowns happened due to COVID. There was a lot more time suddenly, and a friend of mine was updating me with his impressions of Remake as he was going through it, also revealing that the game covered the Midgar section of the original game. In other words, the only real part I got through back then when I bothered with the original game. All of this was enough, so I gave the entirety of Remake a shot. And it was all over. My life, that was. Remake blew me away. The storytelling, the visuals, the music, the gameplay, it was all so exciting. It felt iconic, and it was still just a new game at that point. After completing the game and admittedly getting confused at things, I immediately played the original game again, this time going for that 100% completion. I still haven't beaten Emerald Weapon to this day, but I got through the game alright, and it was amazing. Yeah, I feel like a bozo for dismissing the game back then, but if anything, you can sequence break the original game and use the Beta Snake to learn a really good move early on in the game thanks to the enemy skill materia, an aspect that was one of my favorite things from that original game. Going forward, I then dove into the compilation of Final Fantasy VII, reading On the Way to a Smile, watching Advent Children playing Dirge of Cerberus, playing most of Crisis Core and all of Crisis Core Reunion, reading last year's Traces of Two Pasts, and even going through Remake and the original game again, all to prep myself for this year's Rebirth. In the end, it's all entertainment, and a time sink as such in some ways is a luxury, but it's also a gamble delving into something that might not exactly have a payoff. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth all makes it pay off tremendously. There's references to everything previously mentioned, yeah, even the books, and that's probably due to writer Kazushige Nojima being the core writer of it all, save for Dirge, but I guess that also checks out too. Rebirth picks up just after the post-credits scene from the intermission DLC for Remake, and, like the original game, goes into the backstory of the central protagonist Cloud and his relation to Sephiroth, the frontman amongst a collective of antagonists throughout the Seven narrative, ranging from Genova to Hojo, complete with beach mode. This is also used as the tutorial, which in retrospect does present you with all the tools the game offers. There's a village to talk to others, there's gameplay variety such as playing a piano or moving a vacuum, there's combat that's pretty easy, but this works to it being a tutorial on the nature of the story. It's honestly brilliant, and there's enough subtlety dropped in here where if you've done your homework, you'll get it. After a brief stint in Calm, another town-like setting, but this time the game started, you're shuttled to the grasslands of Gaia, and the real game of Rebirth begins. A bit uninspired, but maybe intentionally so, Rebirth features multiple regions and zones featuring all of the staples of modern-day open-world game design. There's towers to reveal locations of other things, tougher boss fights, intel that ultimately grants you better equipment, quicker travel, fast travel, movement puzzles, all of the such. The good news is tackling all of these things do yield you rewards in which nothing ever feels pointless to do. Eventually you'll land on some side quests as well, all which grant you unique moments with your crew and further expand the story. Aside from a few instances where you're going from one area to another, this is a template of how most of the game operates, with some areas being much larger than others, some offering a grand variety of things to do, and some retaining attention by using narrow passages to help navigation. Adding to this are the plethora of mini-games evenly distributed throughout the journey. There's a soccer football-like game, there's a target practice game, a revamped version of the Fort Condor game, a 3D brawler, a space shooter game, dolphin wave running, a fully fledged racing game, a highly advanced and an addictive card game, and a really lame tower defense game that's only good because of the story behind it. There's a whole different video probably that could be made on my own personal thoughts regarding the story of Rebirth. There's just so much here, and the story itself flows and goes in so many different directions, all while enthralling the player in its lore, mystique, and character relationships. It's emotional. It's incredible. As Cloud, you're somewhat in control of certain aspects of how you'd like the story to play out, whether it's developing camaraderie with Barret, a sibling-like relationship with Yuffie, a fondness and or adoration for the Chosen One Aerith, learning the full story behind Red 13, questioning motives of the oddity Cait Sith, or Ket Shi, respect for Pilot Sid, concern yet optimism for Vincent Valentine, and rekindling a possible flame with the reacquainted Tifa, a character who seems to know a lot more than she lets on. While the bulk of Rebirth's story tackles the beats the original game featured, as well as continuing to be a voice of commentary regarding environmentalism, being true to yourself and your trust and faith in others, the overall experience you'll get from the game is the time you put into it, and everyone's is guaranteed to be nearly different.
The one and only Yuffie!
Cool.
Movement and combat in Rebirth have been refined from Remake, and the options of what you're able to do has nearly doubled from Remake. For example, Cloud's aerial combat has been improved, combined with a blade beam that can fire from his sword after performing a dodge. Every character as well are granted elemental attacks without having to spend a separate meter to use magic. Utilizing the returning Chadley VR Combat Simulator can unlock new moves for the enemy skill materia, which is a bummer only one's included, but checks out after the amount of attack options you attain when getting them all. I mean, just look at this. Tifa's Unbridled Strength has been upgraded as well, including a variety of the move that has a different focus. Barret remains unchanged, save for some new skill sets. Aerith has been given a huge upgrade with the ward shift, allowing her to teleport between places instantly. Yuffie mostly operates the same as the Intermission DLC from Remake. Red 13 joins the party now with a combination of quick minor attacks and larger powerful attacks. And Cait Sith, sadly, is just as useless as in the original game, but is still much improved with the Lux style of gameplay. Sid serves as a pilot for certain vehicle segments, and Vincent's not given much to do this time around, but he still has his unique moments. While it's a gargantuan task trying to fill the over 100-hour quota of getting the game done, it's ultimately worth it due to all the rewards and the level increases you'll get. You could, in theory, just press forward and tackle the main story only, but aside from all the bonuses you get to overall make the game easier and more enjoyable, you'll miss out on all of the critical character beats that really matter when all's said and done. As long as you're in for the ride, you'll probably feel an emotional crash after completing Rebirth, something attributed to its excellent gameplay, its surprising variety, its strong messaging, its vibrant visuals, and a beating heart that just makes you grateful to even experience something of this magnitude. Finally, there's the ending. Yeah, without going too much into the ending of the game, there's definitely a weird feeling of that's it when you're done, and after letting it sink in for a few weeks, it checks out. Prior to the game dropping, the developers went on record saying that they were very much influenced by the arc of Star Wars, and that Rebirth would very much be the Empire Strikes Back of their trilogy. While the game is not even remotely close to the story of Empire, the feeling you get afterwards is certainly similar. Now, there's interpretations that can be made ranging from simple to insane, and we'll all probably not have a good grasp on what the overall plan is until the final game, which, as of now, my guess will either be titled Reclaim or Return, but I could be wrong. The final game of the series is set up to be something quite unique to close out the story of Final Fantasy VII, with returning favorite Zack in the fold. Oh, that's right! Forgot to even mention that multiple timelines aspect from Rebirth. Again, there's a lot here. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was, at minimal, a resonating, moving epic that makes you optimistic for the finale. At maximum, it's one of the greatest games ever made, with an exceptional variety of choices and styles to make the journey all your own. It's an absolute recommend for Final Fantasy fans, and still recommended to anyone for its pure variety. I have theories of what's to come, but I just feel grateful to have experienced this.